Recently, an interesting photo has been featured on various websites that investigate mysterious creatures. As with many of these older images, not much information is known about it, but those who have looked into it have said it was captured by a trail camera and was uploaded to a computer where someone then took a screenshot. The Bigfoot Research Organization suggested the images in question show an adult and juvenile Sasquatch, and said that although sightings like this are rare, there have been multiple instances where people have come forward and said they've encountered more than one of these creatures, and this has caused amateur researchers to put forward the idea that these creatures form their own clans. It's important to note that as of right now, scientists and researchers who study animals are not convinced that these humanoids are genuine, and have used explanations like bears and other wildlife to explain away sightings. However, this hasn't stopped researchers from claiming that not only are these creatures genuine, but that they feel they're getting closer to proving their existence. What's so interesting about this debate is that a creature that closely resembles one of these humanoids definitely existed, and it went by the name of Gigantopithecus. Although it didn't live in modern-day North America, believers have said that we have scientific proof of its existence. So who's to say that an American equivalent isn't living in the dense regions of North America, which would easily allow them to avoid the majority of society? Hunters have said it's photographs like this that prove we're getting closer to answering once and for all whether or not they're genuine, and say that thanks to trail cameras it's allowed us to view areas that hikers normally wouldn't visit, and this gives us an insight into the type of wildlife that inhabits these regions. Although it's hard to prove whether or not photographs like this are genuine, even scientists have come forward and said that it's good to capture evidence like this, but note that further studies are needed in order to prove what we're seeing. One explanation they give is that wildlife such as bears can take on the appearance of humanoids, and they've even shown footage of bears walking on two legs, which mirrors the appearance of a large humanoid. They say this, along with being in the wilderness, could easily force someone into believing that they've just encountered a large hairy humanoid. Amateur researchers though have said there's been thousands of encounters who have all detailed the same thing, and they've said they don't believe that every single one of these individuals have seen bears, even going as far as saying that some of these sightings have happened in locations where bears are not present. Interestingly, it's not until you look at some of these case studies that you realize just how many reports are made each year, along with happening in locations you wouldn't expect. In recent years, Mount Shasta and its surrounding forest have been considered a hotspot of supernatural activity, with events ranging from sightings of strange hovering bats to mysterious lights and even Sasquatch-like monsters. Most of these initial reports, however, seem to predate many of the modern Bigfoot encounters. Sightings of large humanoids have been reported in the area since the national park formed. The earliest reference to giant humanoid creatures living in the region comes from early Native American legends, and they called the creature the Shubsheds. Although the legends were not written down until around the spring of 1953, when nearby university professors interviewed Native American tribes from the region, the stories told remarkable similar descriptions of the local residents' claims of large humanoids dwelling within the mountains. According to these early Native American legends, a race of giants referred to as the Shubsheds were believed to have lived alongside the banks and source of the Flume Creek, and were claimed to have used underground passes and cave systems to reach the top of Mount Shasta. The legends would reach their popularity in the area back in 1962, when a woman who had been camping out near the base of the mountain claimed to have stumbled across a hidden area created by the large humanoids. In her bizarre claims, she described hiking around the mountain and finding what looked like primitive tents and makeshift huts from leaves, along with broken branches and trees that were snapped. Within an area of tall bundle grasses, The woman watched as a large creature appeared to give birth to a small monkey-like creature. Unable to move, the pregnant hairy woman watched the hiker, and once the birth was over, the hiker ran from the area as the pregnant creature immediately began moving as if it were to attack. In 1971, a man by the name of Virgil Larson would also claim to have a mysterious encounter, with his account being reported in the local newspapers before reaching mainstream popularity. According to the Mount Shasta Herald, Larson, a 47-year-old man who was originally from the small town of Salmon, Idaho, was temporarily living in the area of Mount Shasta while working for a logging company. During his time working for the company, he claimed to have seen a non-human creature at around 8:30 in the morning near a helicopter logging operation. According to Larson, he and his logging partner, a man by the name of Pat Conway, had decided to hike down the side of the mountain while taking a short break. Once the two men had separated, Larson then claimed to have seen what he originally believed was a Forest Serviceman walking down the mountain slope near his location. Familiar with many of the workers in the area, Larson monitored the figure and shouted a warm greeting. Immediately the figure froze in his tracks and turned towards Larson, before attempting to rush down the side of the mountain in a different direction. Unsure of what was going on, Larson walked closer to the figure and shouted again, causing the figure to duck behind a nearby bush and peek its head over in Larson's direction. It was at this moment that Larson realized that the figure was not a Forest Service worker, and was instead some unknown humanoid entity. The stench of the creature started to disorientate Larson, as he would later recount that he'd most likely been downwind from the creature and could smell its pungent scent, which he likened to the smell of a half-rotten bear hide. Although he was unsure of the physical description of the creature, as Larson had been unable to get a look at the strange figure, he believed that it had been covered in dirty hair, and said that it started at the eyebrow line and stretched over its forehead and head, leaving only its eyes, nose and mouth exposed. Terrified by the strange sighting, Larson immediately ran from the creature back up to the slope and told several of his co-workers. Several of the workers immediately fashioned makeshift clubs and believed Larson's account, as many of the workers had heard stories of similar creatures in the area. Shortly after fashioning their weapons, the men returned to where Larson had encountered the creature and were able to smell the pungent smell Larson had described. Some of the men described the smell as a rotting animal smell, while others compared it to a pungent skunk smell. Despite spending another 30 minutes in the area, the men were unable to find any sign of the hairy humanoid. Terrified that similar creatures were lurking nearby, the men would contact the local authorities to conduct a proper investigation. Several hours later, Larson would be greeted by members of the United States Forest Service, and this was after using their CB radios to contact the nearby sheriff's office. The US Forest Service members Sergeant Bullington, along with Bob Gray, Rex Lebo and Don Wupshaw, took the witness testimony of Virgil Larson completely seriously and started their investigation within the hour. After using the bush that the creature had been standing behind as a reference point, the US Forest Service members believed the creature to have been standing at a height of around 7.5 feet tall. Fresh bloodstains had been found on neighbouring branches and were collected to be sent for a lab for study, and a series of tracks all across the side of the mountain were photographed for future reference. The results of the blood samples and laboratory findings were not made public. The official explanation of the Larson case was blamed on a group of environmentalists that had been camped roughly 2 miles from the logging operation, believing that the group may have fabricated a hoax in the attempt to scare the loggers away. Despite this easy explanation, the environmentalist group would claim they had nothing to do with the sighting, and Larson himself would conduct several interviews with local newspapers claiming that he saw something completely non-human that day. Additionally, the size, smells and the movement of the creature would have made it difficult for it to have been hoaxed. Since this report, hundreds of sightings of humanoid creature encounters have been reported by local residents and distant travellers. This has led many amateur researchers into believing that the area of Mount Shasta is host to supernatural conditions. So what do you make of these interesting sightings? Be sure to leave your questions and answers in the comment section below, and help us to grow this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.